Good morning and happy Wednesday. It's been a few days, had a long weekend, missed talking to everybody, but so glad to be back. You know, I talk a lot to you all about financial freedom, and I don't want you to think that I haven't thought about domestic violence as a factor when talking about financial freedom, because it is going to be very difficult to even have financial freedom if you are struggling with any issues related to domestic violence. So I want to address that today, and we're going to probably spend some time talking about that. I know we've been talking about home ownership versus renting and all the different ways and the different things you can do to build wealth, but you have to take a different strategy when you're talking about domestic violence. So I want to tell you first about me, and then we'll talk about some of the issues regarding domestic violence. First of all, Sonia Gallion-Calmanica, SoniaGallion-Calmanica.com, and the author of 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent, where we talk about all things single parents. And the goal is to make kids safe by educating their parents. Forgive a little bit of the background noise. I'm constantly traveling, so sometimes there might be others around. But my experience with domestic violence was at a very young age. I had experienced it through step-parents, through parents, and through different things going on in my own life. I've witnessed abuse. I've experienced a lot of it myself, and many families of color tend to think that, you know, beating your kids, corporal punishment is okay when raising their children. I'm personally not a believer of that. I'm not sure it solves any problem. I do believe, however, like if, you know, the kids are touching something, like an outlet or something that could harm them, you know, could smack their hand, that sort of thing, but I do not believe in beating anybody because it's ineffective and it doesn't work. It doesn't teach you anything either. It just makes you afraid. But as I was mentioning, in many communities, there's this belief system that it's okay to provide corporal punishment to your children. And this is reinforced by the churches, reinforced by your community, by your family, by your friends. And it just goes on, and we all think it's normal and it's okay. The problem with this thinking is it destroys the spirit, and it destroys the spirit of children, and it destroys the spirit of adults also. And when I say it destroys the spirit, I mean, when I talk about destroying the spirit, I'm talking about ruining your confidence. The children begin to think they're bad. They blame themselves for the childhood dysfunction a lot of times. A lot of times you find the firstborn children, they tend to blame themselves a lot for what's happening. And they just have this unhealthy, attachment to their parents, and sometimes unhealthy attachment to other people, including their siblings. When these beliefs form, it essentially destroys the child's spirit. In addition, children are kind of unable to self-regulate, you know, and you can self-regulate when you're at a good place with yourself. So that means you know what you need, you understand your feeling, you're thinking, you trust yourself, you trust your judgment, you don't need to rely on other people to make decisions. But when you grow up with abuse and neglect, you're not really sure what's right, what's wrong. You can't really self-regulate. And it takes away your trust in your own judgment. You somehow think you don't even know what you're thinking. Or there's kids who go to the extreme, of course, and they're just, you know, don't care about anybody. We have sort of the narcissistic child that's developed also. Excuse me. Children also begin to think they have no value and they're unwanted, even though they might be. When you are beating them or they're not feeling safe, you're destroying that spirit that says to them, I'm important, I'm valued. When someone grows up with domestic violence, they're probably 20 times more likely to find, date, and marry somebody who's also abusive or experience similar circumstances. They say you can be in a group of 1,000, and these two people will find each other in a group of 1,000 people. In addition, you know, you just seem to bring things into your life that aren't healthy and then don't help you feel good as a person. So that's going to be very difficult to create financial freedom. So what does all of this have to do with your finances? Who cares, right? What does domestic violence have to do with anything? Some people would think, and people who have not grown up with domestic violence, they really cannot understand it. They cannot understand why somebody stays in a relationship when they're being abused, hurt, mistreated, or neglected, and they can't understand how they got in it in the first place. And all of these things, this embarrassment, this shame, this misunderstanding by the public, this is what keeps people in these situations. So what does this have to do with financial freedom? Well, financial freedom requires you to have a sound mind. You have to be clear on who you are, you have to know what you want, and you have to understand what direction you're going in. You can't be so wishy-washy and unsure. Should I make this decision? Should I not? Do I have to talk to 10 people first? Do I need my therapist? That is not somebody on the path to financial freedom. And you need to be able to make a decision without confirming it with multiple people. Okay? And I know I'm talking sometimes to the Christian community as well. And sometimes we read stories in the Bible where it talks about, you know, there's confidence in meeting with multiple counselors, having multiple people give you information and give you instructions. It's not exactly what the scripture means. I know we tend to take things out of context. What that actually means is, okay, you know what direction you're going in. I know what my path is. I know what I want to accomplish. So the reason you're bringing in other people is for strategy, not because you're not sure whether or not you should make that decision. That is definitely not what the Bible talks about, because we have another scripture that tells us that a wishy-washy, indecisive person or lukewarm, God just basically doesn't want anything to do with that kind of a person. So that can't be what it's saying. You need to have a sound mind. You need to know what direction you're going in, have confidence, and proceed in that direction. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. And once you're clear what you want to do, you can proceed in a direction. You have to be able to make a decision and stick with it, because building financial freedom requires long-term commitment. It can't be something you do today, oh, and it doesn't work out the way I want, so I change it. Even people who invest in the stock market, it is a long-term game. If you really want to see the benefits of investing in stock, you're looking at 20 to 30 years out. I mean, people talk about Warren Buffett all the time, and we see he did not even begin to make his first high triple digit millions to billions until he was in his 50s. So it takes a long time to really build. Is it worth it? Heck yeah. And I always talk to single parents about getting a life insurance policy first before anything else, so that you have something stable to move on to do stocks, real estate, and all these other things. That can have times where maybe it looks like things aren't going very well and then it goes well again. But in order to do that, you cannot do these things when you are worried about domestic violence in your life. That is not going to happen. You're never going to be financially free if you're scared for your life, if you're being neglected, if you're constantly being interrupted by drama and issues going on within your personal life. Financial freedom requires decisiveness, and domestic violence will prevent you from being decisive, because you have someone who's just trying to control one person, and they're preventing you from making educated, smart decisions on your own, independent decisions, because their only goal is to keep you down. So you're never going to get anywhere with that person. So how do you begin the process of healing in order to experience financial freedom? Healing is going to take a little while. Healing from domestic violence is going to take you a minute. So if you've been mistreated and this whole time you're not really sure about what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you want to proceed, it's going to take you a little while to heal from that. That might mean you need to meet with a therapist. It might mean a variety of things. But regardless of where you are presently, you can begin the path to financial freedom. But the advice I'm going to give when you're dealing with domestic violence is going to be a little bit different than somebody who's not having that same challenge. Because when you don't have domestic violence, like I talk about a chapter in my book, 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent, I talk about things where give the children freedom and to think, to build, to create, to have businesses. And when they have that, you're going to see these childhood millionaires and just life changers, world changers, when the children are free, when they don't have this fear of my parents don't care about me, don't love me. It's like you can soar to heights you've never even dreamed of when you have no fear. So 5 steps to take if you are in a domestic violence situation. Before you even think about financial freedom, number 1, you want to have an emergency action plan in place. You always want to have an emergency action plan. You want to create code words for your family so that your children know that you're not safe, something's happening, either don't come home or whatever. Totally different than just thinking about finances. But do know, finances are very critical in preventing you from being in these situations and getting out of that situation. Because otherwise you're dependent on a system that really doesn't, have your best interests. Learn self-defense. Always a great thing. Learn self-defense. Protect yourself if you can. Save as much money as possible. And live in a community where someone will create, like a crime-free situation. They'll report it. They'll help you. Because sometimes some of the situations people have is nobody will get involved. And you don't want to be living in a situation like that. So those are the 5 steps to take, like developing an emergency plan, just things to think about, things to do immediately. And then as we get onto the path, after you're in a safe place, as we get on the path to financial freedom for domestic violence, then I have 10 steps. Okay? The 10 steps are: 1, you might want to have group therapy. That's always a great thing. The purpose of group therapy, it helps you see it's not just you having this experience. There's a lot of people having the same situation, and it teaches you how different people respond. So group therapy has always been very effective. Cut off all unhealthy relationships. Give yourself permission, and that even means family members. I'm talking mama, daddy, sisters, whoever, siblings. If you've got unhealthy relationships, cut those out, because they're going to only reinforce the negative situation and mindset you're already in. Take a portion of your income, 10 to 20% of your gross income, place it in an emergency account. This is different than an emergency fund that you would have just like 6 months of savings, 6 months of living expenses for somebody who's not in a serious situation. But for you, you want to always be putting money aside for an emergency, just in case, because as long as you have small children or anything and this person has access to you, you're always going to be kind of in this emergency situation. I know of people who used to just pack up and run away. Rather than divorce, leave the person, they just kind of pack up and leave. So if you're going to be packing up and leaving on a regular basis with your children, you're going to need to have money set aside for that. I always say set up a life insurance policy in the event of death for your children. Always make sure the children are accounted for. Take care of them if possible. This can be tricky when dealing with a domestic violence situation, because you never know what can happen, and you don't want the spouse, if this is a spouse who's causing domestic violence, to be the recipient of your life insurance policy. You want it to be just your children. So if you can, don't marry somebody who's causing harm to you. And if you can do even better and not even get in a relationship with that person, that would be ideal. So set up a life insurance policy in the event of death for your children. Do not build wealth with someone who is abusive in your home. You're going to have to actually wait a little while if you've got an abusive person in the home, because it's not going to help you. You're not going to get anywhere with this person, and it's going to there's going to be constant interruptions to your finances. Make sure your children are always safe before, during, and after school. Do whatever you can. I mean, if your children are having visitation with somebody who's abusive, it's going to be really challenging. I mean, they're going to many times try to prevent you from working, prevent you from getting to where you need to go. So you're always going to have this constant interruption, but just know the kids will grow up. Things will improve. It will get better. A lot of times the people with domestic violence, they move on to somebody new. So hang in there as best as you can. Protect yourself as best as you can. Develop and maintain strong friendships. Nothing will be greater than having strong friendships during this period. Exercise if you can. Walking, anything to build self-confidence, to feel good about yourself again, is always a great thing. And don't give too much information to your children. Try to let them enjoy their life and be children. This is very important. So I hope that is very helpful. Again, just take these ideas, see what works for you, use what you can. I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to give you information post-domestic violence, how you build a life there. Thank you again, Sonia Gallion-Cominica, SoniaGallion-Cominica.com, and the author of 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent, where we talk about all things single parents. Have an amazing day.